This is Jeff Bacon with DIY Writer Podcast. Today we have an author who has written two books. One of them is Soul Reader. The other one is A Heritage of Faith. He's from Maryland. He also is a jazz player. I'd like to introduce Dante Lupinetti. Dante, how are you doing today?
Good.
Good. So we're going to talk about books and all sorts of other things, but the first thing I want to know about jazz. I love jazz.
Really? Okay. Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, no, I do. I love all sorts of music.
Huh.
So you're
Cool.
a jazz player. You play trumpet, huh?
Yes.
Actively?
Yes. I usually I am taking a course in a local community college. It's not really a course. I take it every semester, and all the other jazz players I'm with take it too, because there's a great teacher in it, and there's a couple of those courses, and there's a couple of great jazz teachers locally here, and so we all take it together, and she picks out all the old classics, and changes it up every time. And at the end of the semester, we do a concert. And then also, what's fun about it is that they have she has a local. They're affiliated. The pros are affiliated with a local restaurant that sponsors our a jazz night at the restaurant. So when you call up the restaurant, they usually ask you with or without jazz.
That's funny. So is this a newly acquired hobby, or is this something that you've done all your life?
Well, it's not newly acquired. I've been doing this for about 3 or 4 years, but I mean, I grew up playing the trumpet since I was a little kid, took lessons and took private lessons for like 5 years, played in the marching band in college, but then I hung up the trumpet for like 30 years, while I grew a family and worked and everything like that. So when I got close to retirement, I decided, I'm gonna pick this up again. And then I was fortunate to find a great group of jazz people, teachers and mentors and other people that liked it locally, which I was surprised. And I said, okay, I'm going to get back into this. Originally, I just wanted to play at church. But the thing about Christian music these days is that they don't really like horns. They like guitars and they like drums and maybe a keyboard now and then.
Wait a minute, there's trumpets all over in the Bible. What the heck?
Exactly right. I mentioned this to one guy and he said, what do you mean? Another trumpet player says, what do you mean? The trumpet is God's instrument. I said, yeah. But the contemporary music, I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, a horn. What's a horn? If they're really, they may bring a saxophone in once in a while, maybe, but a trumpet, oh my gosh.
So when I was a kid, I was a teenager. I grew up in a Wesleyan church.
Oh wow!
And actually we switched to Wesleyan, but it doesn't really matter. The funny thing is that was about the time that everything was very traditional in the church. Okay. And there was this band called Striper that was playing in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And a group of us went down to listen to it because it was hard rock and it was, hard rock Christian and so on and so forth. And when we came back, we had to meet with the pastor because we wanted to make sure that, our souls weren't damned because we were listening to hard rock.
Oh, that's funny.
It was kind of funny at the time. Looking back, it's like, wow, things have really changed. But, at that time, if it wasn't an organ or a piano, it wasn't played in that church. And I'm sure if you went back now, I'm sure they have a full band and everything else, just like, everybody else has kind of progressed to. But I think the the views on music have changed greatly in the last, not to age myself, but that was the 80s.
Yeah.
And nowadays it seems like there's a lot more contemporary type music being played, you know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But
It's interesting. Um, my son Jonathan was living in Georgia for about a year, and he went to a church way down there. Can't remember the guy's name, but anyway, he said he said he went in the church and the pastor played the saxophone, and Franklin Jensen, that's the guy's name, and he said all he did one Sunday, all he did was play the saxophone the whole the whole service, and I got a kick out of that. It's interesting. But yeah, I wanted to play, I wanted to play at church. And then I kind of started to realize, okay, they don't want horns, but I grew up on the trumpet. I didn't really want to pick up another instrument. Um, but one thing about jazz, the reason that I going towards jazz is the improvisation. And that's what I've learned in the last 3 to 4 years. And I'm still learning it, is the improvisation. And I like
Mhm.
the impromptu nature of it, and the improvising. And that's the most enjoyable thing to me. And so in class, that's what we do. We improvise, and we learn to use our ear. We learn to all the facets that come along with jazz. And
and the interesting thing about that is, and I my brother-in-law is a huge jazz. He's a huge jazz guy. He's taught in universities, and he tours all over the place. Not now because of COVID, but he plays the sax, and he's an excellent musician, and he's a pro.
okay.
And when I talk to him, just on the creative side,
Mhm.
you know there's a lot of things that cross over from being a musician to being an author, when you
Mhm.
talk about improvising, and changing things up or whatever. And I think that exposure to other arts
Mhm.
helps you develop your writing also. It not only gives you a point of view that you can add into your books,
Mhm.
because when when you're talking about a main character or something like that, you always want to kind of give them a hobby or something that they can do while they're pondering their next move, or
Right, right.
something that they do when the hero's journey turns into just a complete slap fest, and they're down in the dumps trying to figure out what they can do. Having them, I just play the trumpet out on the porch, or out on the balcony, or on the fire escape, or whatever, just to clear my
Mhm.
mind and figure out where I'm going to go next. I mean, that type of stuff really adds a lot
Mhm.
to a book when you put those personality traits and those hobbies into a character.
Mhm.
um so you have this book coming out, Soul Reader, which
Okay.
obviously we can see by your background.
Little advertisement there. Yeah, yeah. It's Soul Reader is an interesting book. Um, my basically in a short, concise way, um, it's what if you could see the state of someone's soul. So the book is about a young man who acquires a supernatural ability, and I won't tell you how he gets that. I'll leave that as a surprise. But
Absolutely.
he acquires a supernatural ability, and that ability is ability to determine. Well, at first, it's the ability to see the state of someone's soul, and it's the ability to determine. Well, it's not. It's the fact that when he connects with that person and he asks them a question,
Hmm.
they have to answer it truthfully. And so when he shakes a person's hand and looks them in the eye, he can ask them any question and they have to answer truthfully. And he at first wonders what this thing is for. He he's totally confused by this. He tries it out on different people. There's in the novel, there's a couple different situations where he tries it out, and he ends up revealing people's deep, dark secrets, and it becomes, but he gets kind of disillusioned with this because he doesn't want to be he doesn't want to just find out people's deep, dark secrets. So eventually,
Sounds to me like we need to get this guy into politics.
somebody said that to me the other day. And so eventually,
A debate moderator.
right? Yeah, that would be a good. Eventually, he gets connected to the CIA through actually through a girlfriend. I don't know if you can see it, but through his love interest, who is an FBI agent, Abby Sorensen.
Okay.
This is Zeke Jackson, by the way.
Okay.
So she leads him into an opportunity in the CIA, and they become aware of his ability, and he ends up going to work for them as like a what's the term, an asset, and or consultant, and they call him in when they need him to interview people.
Okay.
And so they eventually call him in to interview some terrorists that are involved in an assassination plot on the president and the vice president. And the information that he gets, the intel that he gets, and it's pretty much like real-time info, is used to foil an assassination plot on the president and vice president. And there are some twists and turns in the whole thing. And this is part of a bigger series. And the overall series has I would say it has a biblical theme. And if I might just share that theme, it comes from the book of Ephesians. And it's there's a verse in the book of Ephesians, chapter 6, that says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." And so that theme is developed even further in book 2 and book 3. And I've written about 4 chapters in book 2, and I've gotten, so I kind of, and also I've plotted out book 2, and I've also pretty much got the storyline for book 3 also in my mind, and some notes on it and stuff. But that's the direction it's going, and it's kind of the same direction as authors Frank Peretti and Ted Decker have taken, which is basically the Christian fiction genre, thriller genre within Christian fiction. Okay. And a lot of it with the supernatural backdrop.
Okay. So those would be 2 authors that influence you.
Yes, very heavily. Yeah.
Okay. So Christian fiction, thriller, I'm not too familiar with that genre, but there's a billion genres out there nowadays.
Yeah.
You know. So your readership that you're going for is mostly a Christian base, I assume.
Yes, that's my basic audience, but I don't want to be I don't want to be exclusive to them. And so the book and the genre has or at least I'm trying to develop the thriller and suspense aspect to draw in all readers who like good thriller and good suspense and good drama. Mm-hmm. And I'll hit them with some Christian themes, but they won't know it. Yeah. And that's what I like about them.
So my question, the question that kind of pops into my head, and this is just my author brain working. Okay. So do you have a supervillain planned for this series? Somebody who has opposite powers, like somebody who can taint a soul, or
Hmm. Well, there's the first villain I have in it is a guy by the name of Sly McDonald, and he's not really a super villain, but he's kind of a Zeke Jackson works in a TV radio station in DC,
Mhm.
and so his nemesis is is a character that keeps trying to uh, do him in as far his career in. But the bigger villain in this is I have it are demons that come into play when
Okay.
he tries to confront when he tries to talk to certain people. Um, depending on how depending on what they're like, he might when he interviews certain people and he goes and shakes their hand, he's sometimes confronted by a demon, and that demon will not let him past the person in past them to the person he's talking to unless he is in the right spiritual condition, and then they have to give deference to the Lord of Hosts, which
Okay.
is Christ.
Mhm.
So they are really the superpowers. And in the second book and in the third book, they come on a lot stronger.
Okay.
And so I'm really excited about that because I've already started writing the first three chapters in the next book, and my editor has been coaching me on what it takes to write a thriller. And so I wrote the first four chapters, and then after she told me, I rewrote them, because I wanted to thriller them up, thrillerize them more. And so I'm very cognizant of that going forward. And yeah.
And that brings up kind of a segue a little bit, but the writing process. I think a lot of people don't understand that, when you're an author, you have editors, you might even have a developmental editor, you have proofreaders, you have beta readers, you have launch teams that and groups that read your books before you actually release them, and they
Mhm.
give you feedback on things, that you think work really well, and they're like, oh no, you need to change this, and you get all these critiques before you actually release. um so what kind of a process do you have? I mean, do you throw it out to your editor a couple of times? I mean, do you throw it out chapter per chapter, or how do you work this process? Do you um I
Well,
start with a proofreader, actually,
okay.
and once I get it proofread and they come back with maybe you should change this, or maybe whatever, then I throw it to an editor. And
Mm,
the reason I do that is because I don't want the editor to really concentrate so much on, while I do want to try and pick up all the spelling errors and
mhm,
structure errors and everything else. I want
right,
them to concentrate more on on plot holes and the stories, and
right,
make sure
right.
that everything's kind of cohesive. And so I try and take their attention away from that by sending it to a proofreader first, which is cheap
Mhm.
as far as what I've seen. But what's your process look like?
Well, this time on this book, it was very interesting because I contacted 9 or 10 different editors, and um, they they all had different things. Most of them wanted to do a developmental edit, and as you know, the developmental edit is the big edit. It's like finding the plot holes, the
Hmm.
pacing, the person you're writing in, the big stuff. And I wanted a developmental edit on this book. I didn't, I know our one of our fiction coaches, Rami, he doesn't get developmental edits. I guess he probably does his own developmental edit. But I I it was interesting talking to these different editors. And so I eventually found one that did all three types of editing, that did developmental, that did a copy edit or line edit, and then did proofread edit.
Hmm.
So my book went to her for, I sent it to her. She took 3 weeks, did the developmental edit, sent it back to me. I got 3 weeks to revise it. And I'll tell you, it was pretty much of a rewrite on this thing.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh my gosh, and she's going, and we work in Microsoft Word. She's going line by line. She's
Mhm.
commenting on every paragraph, every sentence, and she's going through it. And then as I'm looking at it, I'm going through every line, addressing every one of her comments and rewriting as I go, and making notes to her. How about this? How about that? What do you think of this? And then when I was done, send it back to her. She said, "Good. Looks like you came a long way." And so she does the copy edit and sends it back to me. And um, she took 3 weeks to do a copy edit, sent it back to me. I took another 3 weeks to uh, to fix it, and again commenting on the side, on the margins, every line, every paragraph. And she seemed to be doing the story editing or developmental edit, but it got a lot less all the way through. And so then the third round, I sent it back there, and she said, hang in there, Dan. My nickname is Dan.
Yeah.
Hang in there, Dan. You almost got it. You almost got it. And then she did the proof edit and took 3 weeks to do it. I got it. And then I put in the proof edits, and she said, be cognizant of this, pay attention to this, pay attention to that. She was a great editor. And she is particularly known for working with beginning authors. And I loved working with her, and because she really guided me through the steps, and she had a lot of experience. And I think the book really sings because of her. I think it
Sure.
really flows, and I'm glad to have done it with her. That's a slow boat to China, by the way. I mean, three,
No,
that's
I
about
mean,
3 months of editing.
it's good, I think, especially for other authors that are listening, to understand, what's your process and what do you do? I do things a little bit differently than you do.
Mhm.
Um, just because, I have a proofreader that reads it first, and she's kind of, she goes through and she makes all of her notes and everything, and we work through that. And then I send it to the editor, and then I work with the editor, and then I have a third person, which is another proofreader, that goes through and actually, just one more proofread. And
Mhm.
then once that whole process is done, then I have a group of 10 beta readers that I send out to. And then,
Oh, that's interesting.
here's what I'm going to put out, and then they have their um, inputs, I guess. And then once I get all those, I go back to my editor and say, okay, this is what we're looking at. Here's my
Mm,
side notes. And then we do it one
mm.
more time,
Okay.
and
Wow.
the nice thing about that incremental editing is that, it costs a lot up front, but then it's cheaper on the back end. So, I mean,
Yeah.
but it's still, it's worth it to, get something out there. And regardless of how many people I have look at it and read it and everything else, there's always that one person that'll give me a 1 star saying, you should really find yourself an editor.
That's funny.
It
Yeah.
went through 14 people. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
You
Right.
know,
Right.
my other favorite comment, is I write kind of on the opposite side of you. I write dark fantasy. And so, everything is, um, a little off kilter or whatever. But, I had, some people from another country that were saying that, oh, your spelling errors are horrible. And it's like, I'm sorry, in the US, we spell it like this,
Okay. Right. Right.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And if you, sorry, but almost all my readers are from the US. I have, some from other countries, and it's like, I'm writing for the English that we have here in the US.
Right. Right. Uh,
But it's also important, I think, to note, I don't know how many of these you've gotten, but the 1 stars and the 2 stars, you're gonna get them,
mm,
and you got to take them with a grain of salt. It's not necessarily, some people just don't typically like, you know this type of book, and they
yeah.
bought it anyway, read it, and at least they bought the book and read it. you
Yeah,
know,
right.
that, I mean, that's fine. And they just have something nasty to say, or, you're no Stephen King. I'm not Stephen King. You're right.
Yeah,
You're right. I'm
I
an indie author and I don't have unlimited resources to do, this, that, and
right.
the other thing. And also you're buying my book for $2.99 or $3.99, where you're buying his book for $17.99 at an ebook, you know. So guess what?
Yeah, yeah.
But I do think that indie authors come up with just, I mean, the creativity and the amount of imagination that goes into their storylines.
Mm,
Some of them you get that are writing, writing to the crowd, basically.
mhm.
They're writing the same thing that everybody else is, just to get in on the sales for whatever's hot now. But then
Right,
you have a
yeah,
whole bunch of other authors that are writing what they feel,
yeah,
and they've got stories inside of them that are not like anybody else's,
that's true.
and they go into different twists in different areas, and they attack different things, socially.
Mm,
um Even if you go back and you look historically at some of the great authors that were struggling at the time, they were not only writing their fiction, but they're also writing about what was happening in the world now, and you can kind of get a glimpse as to,
mm,
through the fiction, what the actual reality of the world was that they lived in,
mm,
which I find extremely interesting.
mm,
um when you read some of the greats,
mm.
I just that's one of the things that I noticed, growing up in the author world for the last 3 or 4 years. I'm a
Mm.
latecomer, um
Yeah, same here.
so kind of jumping back, you've already published a book. I mean, this Soul Reader's coming out after the election.
Yep.
Very strategic planning. So what's your reasoning behind that? Why don't you just release it now? I mean, if it
Well,
was ready.
I asked a few people and they said, don't release it before the election because a lot of the oxygen has been sucked out of the room right now. And so, we avoid holidays, we avoid, things that, would interfere with people noticing our book. And the election is big time interference. So mid-November, I'm hoping that um, things will quiet down a little bit, mid-November, people, there's hopefully there won't be rioting in the streets or whatever, and things will kind of more calm. And then I'll have like a week window or something before Thanksgiving where I can launch it and do a few promos. And so that's my thinking. If things change, I might have to change it, who
So
knows?
after the 14th recount of the vote in January,
Man, I hope,
that's
oh
about
my
when we
gosh.
can expect this book.
Yeah, if we start recounting and the TV blows up, heck, it might be next year. I don't know, but I want to give it the best possible chance because
Sure.
you put so much of your heart and soul into something like this. I mean, really, you really do. I mean, how many times do you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and spend 3 or 4 hours writing? I mean, this is what an author does. I'd like
Hmm.
to say my inspiration starts at 5 a.m. Every morning. I mean, that's the you want to be an author, that's the price you pay. I mean, it's like, there's no, I mean, when I jog a little bit, I seem to get ideas and things like that come to me at different times. A lot of times when I'm exercising, ideas will come and, oh, okay, yeah, let me try that.
Hmm.
But I have to make those ideas into words, into characters, and I do that by 5 a.m. getting up and you know, putting in the paces just like you would do if you were exercising or anything else. So if you were practicing an instrument or anything else. So this is my main thing outside of my family and my relationship with my Lord and my church, and I have different commitments and things. But this is, I'm retired, so this is what I do. I want to build an author career, and yeah, it's what I like to do.
I like to say I'm retired too. It's just because I was tired yesterday, and now I'm really tired, so I'm retired. Just kidding. Um, we talked a little bit before the show started about what you retired from. You were a programmer.
Yep, yep.
Yep.
Uh, 35 years as a programmer, software developer, worked in different companies, different um, technologies. Um, my last 10 to 15 years has been in the material handling business. Um, Basically, I worked for a company that's called Honeywell. It bought out several companies, and finally we became part of Honeywell. you know, but the business um, was these sorters and conveyors that run in the Amazons and WalMarts and um, oh,
In the distribution centers.
all the distribution. So I wrote software and I tested the software and I installed it in the distribution centers and tested it in the distribution centers. I did a lot of travel to do that because I'd have to go to the facility and install it and test it. We tested for weeks on stuff. Target, a lot of Target distribution centers all around the country. A lot of time away from home, a lot of night work because when you go in there, they're in full operation. And you go in there and it's like, you got to, what you do is you bring down their live system. And at midnight, you bring down their live system, you install your new system, and you get maybe a window of 4 to 6 hours to test it. And then you better have their old system up running live for them to start production.
Whether you're religious or not, when you're in IT in any form or fashion, and you do that, and you bring down the system in the middle of the night, and you hope to God it's coming up at 6 a.m. when everybody else comes in. There's a lot of praying that happens, especially. I'm going to execute this, and those stupid problems that happen in the middle of the night. That's like, oh my gosh, this is you can test, you can test, and all of a sudden, that one little piece of code broke. And
it's incredible. I mean, the things that can go wrong are incredible. And you try to cover all your bases, and something goes wrong, and the company says, "What happened?" They don't want to hear about your problems. They want to hear problem solved. How are you going to solve? They don't want to hear
I always thought that Microsoft was in the absolute best position, because they would just shovel it out and then patch, and you could complain about it, but who cared? I mean, that's what you had to run on, was the Microsoft Windows. Apple, I think, probably did a little bit better and had a little bit. They have a more streamlined process, but Microsoft and their shovelware, especially when it came to SQL servers and everything else, and you install that brand new version and just break everything. It's like, and you talk to an engineer on the phone and be like, I don't know why that happened. It shouldn't have. Well, it did. Come on.
Yeah.
So my assumption is that looking at your first book, and I haven't read it, so I mean, this is purely an assumption. A Heritage of Faith. This looks like it's more of a memoir of your life and your family. I mean, you have a substantial family. I mean, you have 5 kids and 9 grandkids and so on and so forth, and balancing all of that with being on the road. That had to be very interesting. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that book?
Yeah, that book was a heart and soul book. It was the reason is that book is a story primarily about my kids and their return to faith in the Lord. And some of them had to go through some tough times. Trying to figure out which one to pick.
Well, you don't necessarily have to pick on. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to necessarily pick anything. I mean, right out of the book. I mean, if people are interested, they need to buy the book. Is this one also on Amazon?
Yes, it's live on
It's
Amazon.
on Amazon.
It's
Okay.
yeah, it's been up
So,
there for about 2 years. Yeah.
excuse me.
Uh,
You talk a little bit about the millennial generation and how they had to go through their struggles. And so, what kind of topics or what kind of struggles do you address in this book?
uh, drugs, drugs and alcohol. Um, I had one son that had got hooked on um, painkillers. You
Hmm.
know, he had a bad hip, got hooked on painkillers. Uh, it got to the point where he went also a divorce. He went through a divorce, got hooked on painkillers. Uh, we had an intervention with him and talked him into going to rehab. He It was pretty big for him, pretty momentous. It's very interesting. One of the things that happened in my family that I like to say is the kids helped each other. This one son had this problem. Um, he he was helped a great deal by his younger brother, who had come who had come to the Lord, and um, he was kind of mentoring him. The younger brother was mentoring the older brother, and he even was when his wife left him, and his first wife left him, and he was having a drug problem. uh, my one son met with him and came to live in his house. He worked in the son worked in D.C. He drove 50 miles from out here in Frederick, Maryland, all the way to D.C. every day, and stayed with him, kind of mentoring him. So when we had an intervention with my one son, he said, okay, I think I can do this on my own. I'll do the cheap route. I'll get I'll get help from a local group, and then he fell off the wagon, so to speak, and he he was in an accountability relationship with my other son, and my
Hmm.
other son asked him, did you take a particular drug? And he said no. Well, he lied to him. And so um, then he felt guilty about it. About He was in that relation. He felt guilty about lying to his brother. So as a result of that, when we talked to him later, he decided to do the full treatment and go to a rehab place called No Longer Bound in Cummings, Georgia.
Hmm.
And this No Longer Bound was a faith-based organization that uh, he had to give up his house. We kind of took over his house and sold it for him. Uh, he he left his dog with us for a year. Actually, I think it was 2 years. And he went off to this No Longer Bound and spent like 9 months there in a rehab with them. And actually, it was different because it was a working rehab. He had a job every day he had to go to, and they would do a lot of group therapy sessions at night and on weekends. And so he was involved in that. He came to realize that he had a drug problem from the time he was like 10 years old. And he unearthed a lot of stuff in his life through this.
So
When he
how did he come to realize he had a drug problem since 10 years old? That seems
well,
odd.
uh, maybe not hard drugs. I think, dabbling in this or that, probably, pot and, that kind of thing, and alcohol and things like that with a group of friends he was running with. And
Hmm.
then it just kept getting more and more. And eventually it got to where he was, into harder drugs after what do you call it? I don't know what the term is, but the, uh, the, the drugs you take for um, when you're coming off of like Oxycontin and that kind of stuff. When you're coming
Oh,
off of he was hooked on that kind of stuff, and
okay.
so and maybe tried some more serious drugs coming out of that, which started to get more serious. When you drop a paycheck on a particular drug, you start realizing, oh, this is a problem.
Right.
And so he knew that he was fast getting beyond where he was capable of controlling this.
Well, it's
So, and
it
that's one
sounds
son.
like, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And that's just one. That's just what happened in one kid's life. There's
It sounds to me like your family has developed into an incredible support system
they are.
for each other. Which is always really nice to see. I mean, brothers and sisters usually support each other in times of need. Sometimes not. Sometimes but family is can be your best resource for getting out of something like that, especially when it's something, the interventions when somebody doesn't really realize they're going, well, I haven't hit rock bottom yet. Oh yeah, you have. Yeah,
Yeah.
let me show you,
Yeah.
with a little reality here of where you're going, pal, which is, not necessarily a path they want to go down or even realize they're going down. So that's interesting. um it looks to me like seem to enjoying retirement. You told me about all the traveling and stuff that you plan on doing, to meet your grandkids and other people in your children's lives and everything. What's the typical get together look like for the Lupinetti family? I mean,
Oh my
you've
God.
got 9 grandkids, 5 grown kids, all of the in-laws and everything else. I mean, do you guys rent a coliseum for your family, or how does this work? I'm sure you have other aunts and uncles and everything else.
Well, we've been on a regular holiday. On a holiday, well, I'll say a regular holiday, but on a holiday where I would consider everybody's here. So we have a modest house. It's like a 2,000 square foot house with a basement, a finished basement, and it's like 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. But when everybody's all over here, I mean, we're talking like what, uh, 20, 25 people in
Right.
the house, and
Mm-hmm.
that's just immediate family. And kids, I mean, it's really crazy. uh Kids all over the place, toys. We try to keep the toys in the basement for the most part, but they want to bring up their dollhouse or something else. And but it's pretty much chaos is
Right.
what I would describe it. And a certain noise level. I'm kind of used to that because I grew up in a family of 8, and I'm used to noise. And so the deck, if it's warm weather, we might put some of the food out even in the winter. We might put if we're cooking Christmas dinner, so some of the food might end up on the picnic table out on the deck,
Yeah.
kind of thing, until we're ready to eat it, that kind of thing. And so it's fun because everybody's together. It's a blast.
Mm-hmm.
My wife absolutely loves it. um,
I always got a kick out of I grew up in South Dakota or whatever, but when there was a big family get together on my wife's side, the
uh,
garage became the buffet. The kitchen was loaded up with dishes and pans and
yeah,
pots, and everybody's cooking and bringing in their stuff and everything. And if it
yeah.
was something that didn't need to be cooked or whatever, yeah, just go over there and put it on the table on the in the garage. And that's where everybody lined up to get their food and then file back into the house. I just always thought that was,
Yeah,
but when you have
that's
huge families and big get-togethers, I mean, you use what you have,
yeah,
in the best way you possibly can. But
yeah, right, right. Yeah, I'm not going to go out and buy a McMansion. I would never retire. Just yeah. But one thing we have done, which is um, for like these summer vacations, which I like a lot, and my wife Sue likes a lot, is we we bought a timeshare, and this works for us. I know people hate timeshares, but we bought a Holiday Inn timeshare, and so we've gotten enough points and things where um, we can call. My wife's great at doing this, where we can reserve like 4 to 5 condos at the place,
Oh,
and
cool.
have a family and extended family, and they have like a resort there, so it's great. We'll have the whole family, and they have all these 7 pools and stuff like that, outside and inside and everything. And so we can take the little kids. They have like a wading pool. It's great, so they wade on out, and we can have fun with them, and still it's a blast, because the adults can have fun at the same time, and having everybody there is priceless.
Oh yeah.
You know, we can't afford to buy a house at the beach kind of thing, and it wouldn't be big enough to fit everybody anyway.
Right.
So we kind of do it that way.
So, just kind of changing gears because we're kind of getting to the end of the show here. So what do you see for the future for Dante? What are you doing? I mean, you've got a couple more books and that you want to put out, but what do you see for your future? Are you going to continue writing after that, or I mean, are you going to get into short stories or flash fiction, or I mean, what's your dream here? What you doing?
I guess my dream is that I'm definitely going to keep writing. It's in it's in my blood. Yeah. Um, and I want to build an audience. I really want to get those 10,000 readers, you know.
Hmm.
Um, and I want to, as far as I can tell, I want to stay in the Christian fiction for sure. And I would like to make it, suspense and thriller related. If I don't succeed in that, I'll just pivot to some other genre. There's a lot of Christians like historical fiction, biblical fiction. Maybe go that direction. I'm not
Hmm.
sure. I've got a couple of great story ideas that I've thought about, and that I'll have to be bouncing them off of people. Uh, some really good story ideas that are not thriller based, but I could make them that way. But
They're
I really,
romance, aren't they?
no, they're not
Oh,
romance.
okay. I'm
They're
sorry.
not romance.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
I'm kind of awkward with the romance. My editor helped me a lot with this in this book. It's good to
As
have a
it is
female
for
editor
every guy,
sometimes.
not every guy, but
Yeah.
yeah.
But also, I want to. I'm got a newsletter going with the book now. So one of my lead magnet, I have called a lead magnet that I have in the book, is I offer to include somebody in the story as a character in the next book.
Oh, cool.
And so in doing that, after they sign up for that, I send them a newsletter. I want to get in a conversation with people, on different issues. Like in the book, uh, one of the issues that comes up is supernatural gifts, supernatural abilities. And it applies to both Christian and non-Christian. And I ask the question, is it demonic or is it divine? Because supernatural abilities exist both in the uh, uh, God's supernatural gives supernatural gifts, and Satan has supernatural gifts. And so I like to discuss those kind of concepts, and bring truth into the conversation, But so one way I see this going in the future for me is speaking. I really would like to get into some speaking situations, and go out, and speak and do book signings, and if I get enough of a readership, I want to be like a Ted Decker, where I go out to the book signing and people come in to hear me speak or something like that.
Sure.
That's what I look forward to. Yeah.
Well, that sounds
Just
good.
getting out there.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, hopefully this podcast will help you get out there a little bit. The last thing that I'd like to do is how can people get a hold of you?
Um,
You've got a Facebook page and you have a
yep.
newsletter. Do you have a website?
I do not yet have a website. That's
Okay.
that's coming. Um, the best place to get a hold of me is through Facebook.
Okay.
Um, and my email also, uh, DanteNCO@comcast.net.
Okay.
And the Facebook, I got that link. If you could drop the link somehow, or I can somehow publicize the link to that Facebook page and my Facebook group. Those
Okay.
are the ways to get in touch with me, and I'll put them in the book when it comes out. Um, so that's pretty much it. Yeah, pretty much it right now.
Okay.
Um,
Well, I think it's about time to wrap this up. Dante, it's been a pleasure getting to know you
thank you, Jeff.
and talk to you a little bit here. I just want to say goodbye to everybody. Thanks for listening. This is Jeff Bacon with the DIY Writer Podcast. And check back. And if you happen to be watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. All of you had a great day. Bye.
Thank you.